Fantastic. So welcome everybody. We are the Carbon Literacy Project, and today we're going to be hosting this lunchtime webinar to launch our exciting new e-learning project. So my name is Louise Harling. I am Healthcare and Blue Light Coordinator here at the Carbon Literacy Project, and I will be joined by my colleague Farah, who is Advocacy Officer. Farah is also in on this call under CLP license, because a last-minute name change was slightly too much of a tech potential mishap. So if you're wondering who that is, then that is indeed Farah. We've also got a really fantastic behind-the-scenes team on tech and Q&A as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping to get us started. So we are on webinar mode today. So unfortunately you don't have any access to cameras or microphones, and that's just because we had such interest in such a popular event. So if you do need to communicate with us at all, then you can use the Q&A function, which our team is on. It might be that our team answer that via text. It could be that we save that Q&A for the end as well. So the session today is going to run from 12 until 1. We are going to stick around with our guest speakers for about half an hour at the end. So if you do have any kind of burning questions or things you specifically want to ask our speakers, then please do so then, again, using our Q&A function. This session today is recorded as well, and the recording is going to be available via our YouTube channel. So if you've got colleagues who are absolutely burning to see today's webinar, then you'll be able to share it around following the session. So just a little bit about today's agenda. So we're going to run you through who the Carbon Literacy Project are, who actually are we, and what do we do, and the importance of our work, especially for the NHS. We're going to walk you through what our NHS work is like and where we are up to with things, and that's going to include introducing our newest e-learning pathway and also helping you to understand how to get involved. So I'd just like to invite our guest speakers to come and bring their cameras up. So I'll just pass over to Peter May, who's going to introduce himself.
Thanks, Louise. Hi, everyone. My name is Peter May. I'm a former clinician, physiotherapist from East London, and I'll be talking to you today in my capacity as Net Zero Policy and Delivery Manager for the Greener NHS programme, where I look after the workforce development part of our work, and also I look after innovation and some parts of our clinical transformation work stream as well. So really nice to be here. So exciting to see so many people on the call, and I'll hand back over to Matt to introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you very much, Peter. I'm Matt Sawyer. I'm a GP. I've been a carbon literacy trainer for about 3 years or so now, and find it one of the most thrilling parts of my job. And I'll be talking a little bit later about why I think that clinicians and non-clinicians, how much they get out of the training, and how transformational this can be for patients, for practice staff, for healthcare staff, and financially. It solves all of the problems that the healthcare has got, in my opinion. But I'll speak later.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. It's always nice to hear from people directly. Fab. So we have got quite a lot to get through today. So let's get started. So firstly, if you are from an NHS organisation, you might be thinking, who actually are the Carbon Literacy Project? So we are an organisation that is all about behavioural change and education towards a low carbon culture. So even though we are based in Manchester, historically, we're dotted all over the world now, actually, in our team members. And our team really acts as the sort of the bread and butter behind carbon literacy, and we deal with the facilitation and accreditation, which essentially allows individuals to become carbon literate, host training sessions, develop courses, and advocate for carbon literacy as well. So we are a registered charity, and we do have a fairly small team, and I've been saying that for a few years now, and we seem to just keep expanding and growing, but we do have a really significant impact as well. So what is carbon literacy? So carbon literacy really is it's an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities, and also the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community and organisational basis. So being carbon literate embodies all of those core things. So carbon literacy training, some of the key components which it includes is carbon literacy is always a day's worth of learning and doing. So it's very interactive, it's very engaging. It's not just being spoken at by people for a day. It really embodies kind of all the activities that go alongside it. It should be delivered by those that we trust, someone who's part of our communities, part of our workplace, it's within our workforces, so it's delivered by our peers and our trusted advisors. I always say it's all good and well having a climate expert come in and talk to you about what you need to be doing, but it resonates much, much stronger if it's actually delivered by your peers. And what that means is that we don't actually deliver the training, we support people to deliver the training, but it means that anybody can deliver carbon literacy. So you just need a passion for the subject, a little bit of training experience, or some experience in hosting spaces, be accredited as carbon literate yourself, and it's not rocket science to deliver. It is possible for people to deliver that. Carbon literacy training follows an adaptable framework, and that framework can be applied across all learning settings and audiences. So we work across a range of different industries and sectors, and we use our carbon literacy standard, which includes lots of our core elements in there to make sure accredited carbon literacy courses are of high quality across the board. We do have a checking and quality control system in place for carbon literacy training. So because we're not present for all of the training that takes place, one of the ways which we can make sure that accredited training is of really high quality and everyone receives fantastic sessions is by checking our action and evidence pledge forms. So at the end of a training session, individuals, participants who have attended the session complete an action and evidence pledge form, and within that form they are asked to complete an individual group action and a group action. So two actions which are going to reduce climate emissions and are going to drive the reduction of greenhouse gases forwards, and what are, as a result of the training, that's what those individuals are going to do. So they get collected up by trainers and they get sent through to us here at the project, and we check them all individually with our great certification team, and there is an admin fee for that checking process, and that's £10 per head. So every single person who goes on an accredited course and becomes carbon literate has undergone that process. So we make sure we check those certificates and just make sure that everyone's fully understood the point of the session and that everyone knows how to maximise their influence as well. At that point, you receive a certificate if you've passed the certification, and we also have multiple pre-developed and pre-accredited toolkit pathways in place as well. So some organisations choose to develop their own bespoke courses, however, there is some pre-developed options available, which is probably why most of you are here today, because you might be interested in those pre-developed pathways. So what are you actually going to gain from a carbon literacy session? So these are some of the core things that are covered. So the basics of climate science, again, not really difficult rocket science stuff, just the core basics that you need to know in order to be able to understand what's happening so that you can make effective changes. You'll also understand how those impacts have an effect on us now and also in the future, and also have an effect on your sector specifically as well. So have an effect on healthcare, have an effect on the health of our populations, and how our healthcare needs to adapt to that as well. You're going to gain knowledge of climate change policy and legislation. So that could be on a global level, right down to as local as your organisation or the town that you live in. So you really get the whole breadth of what needs to happen globally and also locally. You're also going to understand the co-benefits of climate action as well. You're going to be able to showcase examples of action happening within your sector and know how to take that action and then how to communicate that with other people as well. So a little bit about the scope of what we do. So this graphic kind of highlights all of the hard work that our team and our trainers and our individuals work towards. So far we've certified over 62,000 individuals who are now carbon literate. Each of those individuals have made 2 action pledges, 1 individual action pledge and 1 group action pledge. We've engaged over 4,000 organisations. We've got 10 pre-accredited toolkits across a range of different sectors. And one thing that I always really like to draw people's attention to on this slide is the 5 to 15% carbon saving. So it's estimated by an engineering firm called Jacobs that everybody who attends a carbon literacy training session will see carbon savings of around 5 to 15% per individual. So you can very quickly see how you can upscale that on an organisational basis to see some really effective changes taking place. So when you gain your accreditation, we accredit individuals for their participation in training sessions, so you can become certified carbon literate as an individual. You can also become certified as a trainer as well. Now the trainer certification is a completely optional route, so it's not an essential part. You don't have to be accredited as a trainer to deliver, but it's just an additional badge to have. And also we accredit organisations as well. So when organisations are rolling out lots of carbon literacy, they're dedicating lots of resources to it, and they're really, putting training and engagement behind what they're doing. We also can accredit those as well. So you're quite possibly thinking at this point, this all sounds great, but what about the work within NHS and healthcare? So that's kind of the next bit that I'm going to walk you guys through today. So just to kind of kick us off, these are some of the fantastic organisations that have supported, partnered our work, worked alongside us so far. So there's many more NHS organisations who are actively rolling out carbon literacy training. These are the guys that have been involved in some of the development that we've done. So, it's very much been partnerships with lots of these organisations in terms of making sure what we produce is right for the sector and really works for the sector as well. So firstly, I just want to highlight this document here. So hopefully if you folks are already interested in climate change, carbon reduction, all of those things, you are probably quite familiar with this Delivering a Net Zero NHS document. And I just want to draw your attention to some of the key components that are raised within this in terms of staff engagement, especially with the net zero agenda. So this document talks about upskilling the workforce to learn, innovate and embed climate action. It talks about things to do with everyday actions to engage staff, and it also talks about increasing carbon literacy as well. And if you're familiar with this document, it's quite likely that you'll be familiar with these targets as well. So, for example, the emissions under the NHS's direct control need to be at net zero by 2040, and the emissions which are under influence need to be at net zero by 2045. And that's really, really outstanding that a national health service the size of the one that we have is, globally leading in terms of net zero goals. And that's really significant. But what I just want to get us thinking about is it possible for targets on their own to get us to net zero? And that's something I want to introduce on the next slide, because this slide highlights all of the different international global legislation and policies that have taken place since the 1960s, and it also tracks the continued rise in global temperatures as a result of increasing greenhouse gas emissions. So what this really highlights is that actually strong policy and legislation in place is one thing, but seeing a reduction in temperature and a reduction in emissions doesn't actually stem from policy and legislation alone. So clearly there's a missing piece here in terms of what we're trying to do in reducing emissions in order to get to net zero. So what exactly is that missing piece? And that missing piece is engagement in these goals. So in order to kind of see a net zero NHS that actually for it to be something tangible which we can achieve, we really need to make some changes in the way that we are doing things. And these changes really need to come about from our fleet and the way we move around. It needs to come from our diets and the food that we're consuming and low carbon choices there. It needs to come from the way that we get to work, the way we travel around our sites, the way that we transport goods. It needs to come from research and innovation and the work that we do in those spheres. Also needs to come from the buildings which we currently work in, how they run, how they support our staff and our patients. And it also needs to come from changes in the way which we deliver high quality care as well. So in order to lead to all of these changes, clearly we need to sort of educate staff and engage staff in this net zero goal, because these points involve everybody across our NHS organisations. It's not just the responsibility and the role of one or two individuals at each organisation or the sustainability team. It really is about getting everybody on board. And that's where carbon literacy can come in. So carbon literacy can support staff engagement and help to bridge that gap between the policy which we have in place and the action and the changes which we need to see. It can encourage collective action, and it can provide inspiration as well. So carbon literacy training isn't going to tell you all the X's and the Y's of the exact things that you need to do. It's going to build on the skills and the knowledge which you have in order to come up with your own solutions. And as I mentioned, it doesn't take a climate expert to deliver this. There's kind of not enough of us people working within education spheres in order to be able to actually make a significant difference. So that's why we need support from people across the board to deliver training. And yeah, it's the inspiration piece, really, in order to be able to build that skills and that knowledge. So that's about enough from me about who we are and what we do. I'm going to pass over to Farah and Peter May, who are going to have a quick chat about how carbon literacy can engage staff and support a net zero NHS as well.
Lovely, thank you so much, Louise. And it's so exciting to kind of see what's been happening in the carbon literacy space already and how many organisations are involved. So really, let's turn the attention to you, Peter, and you can sort of help us understand how this can work a bit better for you as the organisation. And I just wanted to kind of pick your brain around this, really, and for the audience out there to hear about it. Again, it's very much peer-to-peer, and it's really much about getting that insight from those that are sort of part of the organisation. So I'll just start off with quite an open question, really, and sort of saying, why does the NHS need carbon literacy? What, in your opinion, is its value, and how can it work? We'll start off with the main one, the bigger question: why does the NHS need the carbon literacy?
It's an excellent question, and I'll come on to that. I've just noticed with a great deal of excitement that the count of how many people have joined has almost doubled since the start of the call. So I just introduce myself quickly again. I'm a clinician, Peter May, and I look after the workforce part of the Greener NHS programme. I'm super excited to see that already over 200 people on the call. And I think in some ways, perhaps that answers the question that you've just asked, which a great deal of why we've done this and why carbon literacy is needed in the NHS is, of course, there's a huge demand for it. And I think maybe to kind of draw the story back a little bit would be my first encounter with carbon literacy. So I joined the team, Greener NHS team, a couple of years back, and shortly after I joined, freshly from the kind of clinical and research space, we were piloting some of your leadership programs, the carbon literacy leadership programs in the national team, and going on that course the single day was really helpful in building a strong foundation for me in terms of understanding the climate science. And as I've gone through my journey of working in sustainability and healthcare, I've realised that the topics that are discussed in carbon literacy and the support for engagement of action are themes, learning outcomes that come up time and time again across any sort of healthcare and climate content or learning, what's the right word, educational content or learning resources that you encounter. So whether that be a policy document, whether that be an educational course. I did an MSc course recently, and similar sorts of themes and topics emerged to the sorts of things that are covered in the training. So I just think it provides a really excellent foundational knowledge. Now, that partly answers your question, but there are some more sort of widespread points that would be important to make. So, as Louise mentioned, the NHS is obviously the first healthcare system to kind of set a net zero target and then plough some significant resource into actually achieving it. Now, what that means is, because we're world leaders, there's a lot of new stuff for people to learn, not just us in the national team, but everyone out in the system, whether that be in trusts, whether that be in GP practices, whether that be in estates teams. And that means there's a huge amount of capability development that we need to do. So bringing everyone up to a sort of foundational level of knowledge and skills is something that I think carbon literacy can play a big role in. It's certainly part of a suite of training and education that we intend to design, and a critical part as well. And I think it really meets specifically the need of that person who's started to engage in that agenda, so the climate and health agenda, but really wants to take their learning to the next level, build that ability to take action and drive action, and also to bring their colleagues along with them with the journey on the journey. I think that's kind of where carbon literacy sits in our vision. And yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of where we see carbon literacy fitting into the wider picture.
No, it absolutely does. It totally makes sense. You know, it is an ambitious target, but again, with that education piece and with more an informed kind of decision around this, it's going to enable people in the workplace and people in the NHS to make those decisions to reduce their carbon impact as well. So that totally makes sense. I suppose you really answered my second question as well, because that was really about sort of how this is going to be suitable for the NHS as an organisation, and sort of how is this kind of in line really with NHS net zero policies. I suppose you've sort of started to touch on that, but perhaps you can bring a bit more context around that and how you can see that fitting in, and how you can see people understanding this, because I think the bigger struggle is there is people not necessarily understanding what net zero actually means and some of that terminology. So yeah, just a bit more around kind of how that fits in with your kind of net zero policies.
Yeah, I think there's plenty more to say on that. I think in terms of how we know that this offer, and of course you never quite know until hundreds or hopefully thousands of people go through and they test it and we refine it. You'll never know that it exactly does what you want it to do. But I think we've given it the best possible chance. Firstly, by knowing that organizations want this. So we've looked at our green plans. You know, there's 250 odd green plans out there from organizations across the NHS. And quite a large number of them actually mention carbon literacy explicitly in the workforce components of their green plans. So there's a real demand and an understanding of the value of carbon literacy from organisations. So we know that we're filling a market need that is there. And again, reiterate, the number of people on this call, I think, probably reinforces that. The other reason that we know that we've got a good chance of this training fitting what people need is that we've been developing this together with yourselves in carbon literacy, but also organisational partners over a couple of years. Really, we've been piloting this thoroughly. It's been co-developed with partners, trusts, organisations, trainers, to ensure it fits the need of learners, which I think is obviously absolutely critical. And there's been input from our kind of key policy specialists in the national Greener NHS team across the whole design process to ensure that everything that we've included in the programme is up to date, in line with current policy. And yeah, I think the pilots that we have run have hit some really diverse groups, whether that be clinicians, whether that be researchers or leaders. So we have a really nice strong kind of basis to understand that, and we've built in a strong set of evaluation as well, which means that should there be any glaring errors, then we're able to kind of refine and change that. Also worth mentioning that we sort of listened to the first round of pilots that we did, which is that a day's training is really challenging for staff to carve out time for, especially if it has to be completed in that synchronous pathway. And I know Louise will talk a little bit more about this later, but we're really keen to give learners an opportunity to shorten that really critical face-to-face element or online but live element of the training and supplement it with some e-learning which provides some of that foundational knowledge. So I think we know that it should fit better. We appreciate it's still hard for staff, especially at the moment, to carve out time for training, but we feel that we've given it a good chance for people to do that by creating an e-learning pathway.
Well, that's great. I think that's that's really one of the advantageous parts of the carbon literacy project, in that it's got to work for you as an organisation. You know, if there's sort of you do your rollouts and you sort of your initial pilot courses, and getting that feedback to understand really what's going to work for your organisation and you know, individual trust, I think is really important. So that's really good to hear as well. I suppose then, how will you envision Greener NHS sort of supporting a kind of a wider carbon literacy rollout? And again, you may have touched on this before, but just to kind of get some sort of, you know, a bit more detail around that would be interesting.
Yeah, no, good question. I think I can certainly say that we're incredibly committed to ensuring that both individuals and organisations have a good opportunity to access this. I'm sure Louise will touch on this later, but we're making at least the first 120 places available. Well, 120 online places available completely free for the workshop side of this training, to ensure that we have a first tranche of people coming through and not having to worry about financing their place on the workshop element. So we're really delighted to announce that, and we'll also be making a further 60 places available to organisations as well. And we hope to massively expand that, given what we know about the scale of the NHS and the workforce, and that's something that we're looking at in the immediate, not the long-term future, but details of that will follow as we work through that. And I think also worth mentioning that we're working with Carbon Literacy, who obviously have a huge amount of experience of scaling this kind of training in different sectors, whether that be in transport, I know is kind of one of the big ones. We're keen to draw on that knowledge, and we're pulling together a guide for organisations who want to really embed this in the way that they work and their business as usual, particularly from a workforce development perspective. We're building a guidance document which we'll make available to organisations as well. So I think there'll be a number of different avenues alongside the two that I've just mentioned there. But yeah, we're certainly incredibly committed to ensuring this really lands with everyone that needs to see it.
That's fantastic, and you're absolutely right. It's got to be a collaborative effort. It's such a huge organisation, and the way that we've seen carbon literacy roll out in other sectors as well, that it has to be a cross collaborative kind of movement, if you like, to get everyone on board and understand the basics around this, to then again eventually take action and reduce their carbon impact as well at work. So that's amazing. I mean, I've learned so much in this short time, Peter. So thank you so much for answering some of those questions. And I shall at this moment pass back to Louise. So thanks so much again, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, guys. And just in the nick of time, there I appear. So while I just share my screen, I'd just like to remind everyone who is new to the call that if you do have any questions, then please pop them into our Q&A. We've got a fantastic team of individuals who are all on board with answering those, which is really great. And we'll also have some time at the end as well with our guest speakers. So if you've got anything specifically in mind for those guys, then do let us know. Excellent. So after we've heard from those guys, I'd just like to talk a little bit more about our newest development, which is our e-learning pathway, and what kind of materials are available for you in order to support the process of delivering carbon literacy. So I'm just going to check with my team that my screen share is all up okay, which they will let me know on our chat. And so what is available to you in order to deliver carbon literacy? So we've kind of been developing this alongside Greener NHS and also e-learning for healthcare as well. And there's a few different course pathways which you can take in order to pick up materials and run carbon literacy. And so far, these course pathways that we have existing have certified over 580 individuals across the NHS. So when we say they're tried and tested, we really do know that they work, because we've had that many people go through the training and become carbon literate as a result. So the toolkit packages that we have are pre-accredited, pre-developed alongside some of our fantastic partners, and it's been developed in line with Greener NHS in terms of current offers also available, so you really do know that it is a trusted piece of training. So we co-develop this training. We co-author it. So yeah, we've had lots of feedback, review periods, focus groups from different individuals across a range of different areas of the NHS to make sure that this works. These materials are free to access for NHS organisations to be able to run certified training. The only cost that is incurred when running carbon literacy training is certifying your learners. Now, that is an essential part of the licence which the materials are granted under, and that's just £10 per certification costs per learner. So if you're new to the webinar, you might need to jump back on the recording just to find out the details about that. That it's one of our quality control and evidence checking systems and how individuals become carbon literate. And the materials which we provide really looks into the practical aspects of applying this rather than just knowing all the science. So again, anyone can deliver this training, so suitable for sustainability managers, green champions, anyone with some passion. So the only thing that you need to do in order to run this training further is become carbon literate yourself, have some passion for the topic and for the subject, and yeah, trial it out. And what this means is that because anyone within NHS organisations can deliver, very quickly you're able to build up quite a cascade approach to training. So as one individual who delivers to a cohort of 10 people, those 10 people can then go on to deliver that training further. So quite quickly, before you know it, you've got a whole team of individuals across your organisation who are able to deliver carbon literacy. And from the slide there, you can just see some of the screenshots which are included in our workshop phase. So there's multiple steps to this new toolkit pathway, which we are now offering. The first step is to complete your e-learning. Now that's been developed alongside e-learning for healthcare, Health Education England, and essentially that's 2.5 to 3 hours worth of e-learning, depending on how quickly you complete the assessments. So they are hosted on the NHS Learning Hub, and again in partnership with our partners, and they are accessible to everyone who works across the NHS for free. So anyone can go onto their learning hub to access those e-learnings and complete them. They're very interactive, very engaging. They use videos, assessments, case studies, and the topics that are covered within that e-learning is climate change science, climate change impacts, how that's going to be impacting on healthcare, climate change policy, vulnerable groups, and how to communicate climate change to others. So that's your step one, is your knowledge element of the training. And your step two, and you're not carbon literate just from completing step one, unfortunately. You do have to also complete step two, which is your workshop session. And that's your group element of training, where everyone can come together and learn together, and it's your kind of group inquiry and engagement session. So that's the materials that we've developed in order to support the full carbon literacy accreditation. And that is a half-day workshop session. It is a hybrid design, so it can be designed to deliver in an online session using Microsoft Teams or Zoom. It can also be used to deliver in a face-to-face session as well. And it's incredibly engaging. It uses lots of breakout rooms, discussion spaces. So really, it's not just being spoken at for half the day. It's individuals coming together, having lots of things to discuss and talk about. So it's really about, tapping into individuals' skills that they have existing and making sure that they are applied to carbon reduction. Now, the workshop session and the e-learning sessions are suitable for all. The workshop is where things get a little bit more customised. So when you host a workshop session, you can host to a completely mixed group. So you might host to your sustainability champions or your green network. And that might be individuals from primary care, secondary care. It might be GPs, it might be nurses, it might be someone in estates and facilities. It could be a real mix. And the workshop materials can be tailored and customized to suit a mixed group, or it could be that you have all your folk from a certain nursing team, or all individuals from estates and facilities groups, and therefore the training can be really tailored even more specifically to a group who are all working in the same workforce. But there is that flexibility there within how it is customized. And some of the topics which are covered in the workshop include a bit of an e-learning recap, because ideally there shouldn't be too much of a wait between completing your e-learning and attending a workshop. But sometimes, practicalities mean that you might not get a chance to attend your workshop for a little while before your e-learning. So you'll recap some of that knowledge. You're going to look at carbon footprints. So carbon footprints as an NHS, as an organisation, and then kind of more specifically to your trust, you look at your green plans and what's involved in rolling out your green plans. It looks at things like how you can drive the green plan, how you can use your position within the NHS as a trusted messenger to communicate climate change to others. It looks at things like the co-benefits of taking climate action. So what else can we see, not just on our environment, but what support is in place for our communities, for our finances, for increasing NHS capacity and making the workplace a happier, healthier, more positive environment to be in. Things to do with adaptation, how to influence others, and the role that we play as, like I said, trusted messengers. So just to give you a whistle-stop, because we don't have loads of time, this is some of the extracts of what the e-learning is looking like. So again, this is available as of today on the NHS Learning Hub. So you've got separate modules to complete. You're not going to lose your progress if you go in and complete module 1, and then later on you decide that next week you're going to pop in and do module 2, and that's fine. There is an assessment at the end of each module, so you can't just fly through and then be like, cool, job done, that's all there. There is a series of questions and answers to do as well, but it can be completed in your own time, and there's lots of click-throughs and animations, so hopefully it should be as interesting as possible in terms of receiving e-learning. So some of the materials which we provide for step 2 to run the workshop include a trainer manual. So that's your kind of comprehensive guide to delivering your workshop session, which will be half day. We also include a slide deck as well, similar style to what we've got up today. We've also got an activity pack. So that will be either a printout pack if you're delivering in person, or it's going to be an interactive PDF. We've also got our certificate application and evidence form, so how you become carbon literate as an individual, and then a series of rollout guidance, support documents, things to help you in your journey of rolling out carbon literacy. So in terms of how organisations have actually found using this new toolkit approach, I am just going to pop over to our video stream, which my colleague is going to play, and we're going to hear a little bit from our pilot sessions at Manchester Foundation Trust. Once we've heard from those guys, we will be passing over to Farah, who's going to have a chat with Matthew Sawyer, who's actually been involved in delivering some of these sessions. So I'll hand over to Fiona to stream our video. As an organisation, we support the development and delivery of a day's worth of climate education, which is suitable for everybody who lives, works and studies across society. So today's session is really focusing on healthcare employees and how healthcare employees can reduce their emissions and support NHS net zero goals.
It was a massive eye-opener to sort of think that the NHS has more of an impact on the environment than sort of flights do, really, which is just massive. I just did not have any idea that it was that big.
And the people teaching us today are also staff from the hospital, so it's nice to know that I'm being trained by people that work in the NHS, that know the systems that are in place. So that's made it really relevant to my work area, so I've really enjoyed it.
This isn't about polar bears and melting ice caps and about things really far away. This is about what individuals at NHS trusts can do to reduce their emissions as an organisation and support NHS net zero goals.
So the NHS has a really big impact. It's got a really large carbon footprint because of all the consumables that we use, the kind of medicines that we use. So it's really important that people are aware of that impact and what we can do to prevent it moving forward, because ultimately environmental climate change problems are a healthcare problem as well. So it's important that we are protecting our future patients and our staff and their well-being as well by making positive changes now. we need to empower our staff with the knowledge, the experience and the confidence to take action. And I think the Carbon Literacy Project delivers exactly that. It's important to implement this training more widely, get more people on board, get more people engaged, so we can work together for a better future for everybody.
Lovely. Thanks so much. A very impactful video. Climate change problems are healthcare problems, so that certainly resonates for you folk, I'm sure. So thanks so much, Matt, for joining us today. I suppose I want to come at this from a sort of a practical trainer point of view. You've been training, you mentioned, for just over 3 years. So I just kind of wanted to pick your brain around that and sort of the training and the materials and the logistics involved around that. So I suppose the first question that I'm going to go with is, how have the kind of toolkit training materials kind of worked for delivery so far? Perhaps especially using them online as well. What has been your experience with the materials to date?
Yeah, no, thank you. So just for those who joined, I'm a GP by background, but have become a carbon literacy trainer about 3.5 years or so ago, and have been involved in the designing and developing and piloting of a number of the healthcare carbon literacy toolkits. And for me, really, the training, the beauty of working with the Carbon Literacy Project has been that it's an absolute joy, because everything's there that you need. You don't have to go off and find a lot of facts and figures yourselves, because it's part of the toolkit. It's part of the thing that you can pick up and run with straight away. So actually, the only bits that you then need to do is to be able to make it specific to the department or the organisation that's actually receiving the training. And it's about making it relevant to here and now and today, not polar bears in 2100. So actually the delivery has been remarkably easy. And I think really it's because of the audience engagement, because of the group activities, the interaction. I think we've probably all sat through enough training where we've just been PowerPointed to death and think, oh God, not another PowerPoint. But because this breaks up and is has got lots of different learning styles, lots of different activities, it actually means that it's a joy to deliver and it's a joy to receive. And I've done it both online and face to face, and find that, you know, as long as the audience, the participants are coming along with that optimism and the enthusiasm, actually it's an absolute joy. And you know, my wife will tell you that you know, at the end of a good carbon literacy training day, you're just on a high, because you know what a difference you've made. So yeah, it's been great, and I think that this hybrid model is absolutely what we need in the health service at the moment.
That's good to know, and you're right. I think I'm also a qualified carbon literacy trainer, so the delivery is quite different. It's not like any training that you would receive in the workplace. It's, you know, it's not sitting there just getting all this information. It's very much action based, and I think that's very much the value again of it. So thanks so much for that. And I suppose moving on, how do you think other NHS staff will find the training materials? Do you think they're easy to use, easy to implement? Is it easy to sort of make these more bespoke to the different regions that you're in? How would that work for different organisations within the NHS?
Yes, I think the whole toolkit is, you know, very well written, very well thought out, and because it doesn't assume anybody's got, you know, high base knowledge to start with, it's there to sort of, you know, work from the ground up, and so it's actually available to any and every member within the health service. And actually, because we've all got a role to play, and we've all got a footprint and environmental impact of what we do, whether we are admin, management, clinician, non-clinician, actually this is about all of us understanding what our role is. And I think that for me, the bit that I really enjoy is where you get different people from different parts of the organisation together. So where we've had sort of estates managers and ITU clinicians in the same training, realising that they're actually trying to tackle the same problem, but both thinks that the other one's going to put up a barrier, and that suddenly they go, you want to solve the problem in the same way. I do too. And it's just absolutely beautiful. And for me, I think carbon literacy is a slight misnomer, because actually this is about delivering great outcomes for patients, improving staff morale, staff well-being, improving the finances. So actually it is important and relevant to everybody, and because the training is you can develop it. There's what's known as blue slides within it, which means that you can put in a slide relevant to that organisation or that department. It means it really is as bespoke as possible. And so suddenly people are coming away having covered a lot of ground, but they really haven't found it onerous. It builds gradually, but they really understand what they can then do, because as you say, it's about action, it's about doing.
Definitely, that's really useful and really important to understand, actually, that you can sort of you feel like you own it at the end as well. I suppose that leads into my kind of next question, in terms of what are the changes that you often see in learners sort of before and sort of during and after the session.
I think a lot of people are a bit fearful. They think it's something I don't understand. It's a big thing that I probably should be doing something, but I'm not really sure what, and I don't have enough time. I'm busy enough as it is. This sounds like more work. And actually, when they've been through it and they realise that this isn't about doing any additional work, it's about changing the behaviour of what happens at the moment. So, for example, clinicians will still be prescribing inhalers. It's just the type of inhaler is different, or there's still inhaler technique that needs to be taught to patients. It's just a different technique. So there's a lot of things which it's not about doing extra. So people then come away saying, great, I had the intention, I knew that we were in trouble, globally, but I wasn't sure what to do. So this really is that it's enthusiasm, it's optimism, it's empowering. The number of people who say, I'm really pleased that I've now got a number of colleagues who are also trained within my department or within my organisation, because they're coming together and suddenly they're being supportive of each other. And I think that, over the last few years, we've taken quite a battering in healthcare. And so to have something which is actually positive and enthusiastic feels a bit weird, because we're not used to this, but actually coming away saying, I can make a difference now. So the number of people that say, it's made me smile, it's made me realise what I can do, it's made me realise that there is hope, that doing things individually and collectively can make a big difference, but a difference in the areas that are important. So outcomes for patients, staff well-being, finances for that department. And actually we can improve all of these things by helping people to become carbon literate. So you get people who are really fired up and buzzing afterwards, and that's the bit that gives me the joy, because I know that they've got the joy. It's lovely.
It's absolutely empowering, isn't it? It's just as you say, to have that kind of moment of actually I can do something, and I might feel like I'm climbing quite a steep hill at the moment, or mountain, when it comes to the global climate crisis. To feel like you can do your bit actually is a positive spin on something that's very grim. So yeah, thanks. That's really great. And I suppose a final question then. What would you say to organisations that are considering rolling out carbon literacy?
Well, I think that it's clear that there's a lot to do, both within an organisation, within a country, globally. But really, the take-home message is that it is not too late for us to make a real tangible difference to the natural living world that we live in, and the actions that we can take are real, tangible, practical, can be done today, this week, this month. So I think for me, carbon literacy is a must for any organisation that really is caring about great patient care, great staff outcomes, being financially secure, as well as a low carbon future. So it's not we do one or the other, but actually all of them are interlinked. So for me, in my opinion, we are only going to get a natural, habitable world if we can roll this out to everybody across healthcare, and that we all do those actions together. So I think that organisations will see a real positive can-do, we're all in this together attitude as a result of this, and that I think is worth its weight in gold at the moment. That teamwork and that camaraderie, that coming together with a joint purpose, I think is transformational.
That's amazing, and that's what's needed for sure at the moment. So yeah, that's been really, really insightful. So thank you so much, Matthew. It's been really great chatting to you and learning about how you've been delivering carbon literacy. So I'll hand it back to Louise, and thanks again so much.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. It's always really excellent hearing from Matt as a GP and a sustainability consultant and a carbon literacy trainer. I think there's such value there in the middle ground between carbon literacy and NHS services. Fab. So you should see some more of my screens up here. Oop. And my team will just let me know that that's all come through okay. So you're probably thinking this all sounds fantastic. However, how can we get this started within our organisation? So there is a few guiding steps which you can take in order to roll out training. And training can be delivered in-house using your own members of staff. But we also understand that that's not always possible within the NHS because everybody is really busy. So you can use external training providers to support in that delivery as well. So in order to roll out more carbon literacy training within your organisation, the first step is to become carbon literate yourself. And that first step usually happens by attending an external carbon literacy training session. And Peter did mention earlier in our Q&A session that some of those spaces are funded. Now, the reason for that is because if you are attending a carbon literacy training using an external provider, then quite often there is external charges that are involved in the delivery of that. And so those pre-funded spaces that he was referring to is referring to those spaces. So there's the opportunity for that first step to be funded for a lot of individuals. So definitely take that opportunity while it's there. So once you have become carbon literate, then what you can do is you'll be able to find that on the events part of our website as well, those open carbon literacy training sessions, and the link to that will be posted up in the Q&A, so you can go straight over there and find some opportunities to become carbon literate. Once you've become carbon literate yourself, you've gone through your day's worth of training, which has been the completion of your half-day e-learning, followed by the attendance of a half-day workshop. You should then book in to attend a Delivering Successful Carbon Literacy session. Now, that session is just going to give you a little bit of extra hand-holding, a little bit of support and guidance alongside the kind of admin and the practicalities of delivering a session. And if you intend to deliver that session to others within your organisation, again, you can find links for Delivering a Successful Carbon Literacy session up on the events page of our website, so the same page. And we are hosting healthcare specific Delivering Successful Carbon Literacy sessions as well, and so they'll be tailored even more specifically to the NHS and to healthcare. At that point, we would really recommend that you sign up for our newsletter and get involved in some of our networks, just so that we can collaborate and join together different trainers across the NHS, so that there's a bit more camaraderie in everyone, so you don't feel like you're rolling this out on your own. So we have a quarterly newsletter that we send out, and there will also be a series of Pioneers networks as well. At that point, once you're certified, you've attended your Delivering Successful Carbon Literacy session, you're part of our networks, you can then request to receive the training materials. So if you are also an existing trainer who's been delivering current toolkits, then we recommend requesting the new training materials, and you can get hold of those by emailing us at healthcare@carbonliteracy.com. There is a few forms to sign just to make sure that everyone's clear on the licensing in which these materials can be granted under, and just so that we have all of the details. We use a jot form to do that, so it's quite a quick and easy process. It's not signing your soul away, it's just so that you understand the usage of the materials. If you have previously signed a jot form, you have access to the current toolkit materials, and you've already said that you're interested in e-learning, then we will be getting in touch with you to grant you access to those materials, because you've already gone through all of these steps. So just sit tight and we will be in touch in order so that you have access to the newest content. The next part would be to organise a pilot session. So keep it nice and small, maybe invite some of your trusted people within your team, we tend to say no more than sort of 10 as a max to begin with. If organisations do want to host bigger sessions, you can do that, but you need extra support in your training delivery. So perhaps you might organise a pilot session with a co-trainer so you can bounce between the two of you in order to deliver. Equally, if you wanted to host a larger session, then we'd say between 10 and 12 people per session. However, if you wanted to host more, then you need an extra facilitator per 5 extra learners. So it's just to make sure that everyone's discussion is engaging and on point, and you've got support with your tech, because trust me, having seen big training sessions, you need support in tech and you need support in the room, just to be able to, you know, hand out the right forms and make sure that everybody is engaged. At that point, you'd then collect up all your learner evidence and you'd get your cohort of individuals certified using our certification stream. And at that point, those learners can then go on to become trainers and deliver training, perhaps support you in your training delivery as well. And from there, you can really watch carbon literacy cascade across your organisation. So we are coming towards the end of our webinar, but I did just want to share a quick story with you guys in terms of that cascade approach, because I think it really highlights how getting the right people on board and getting a good quality of training in place can really support that cascade. So we worked with an organisation who decided to train their estates and facilities senior staff. They hosted an open session and their director of estates and facilities came along just out of interest because he had a passion for the subject. And then as a result of that individual becoming carbon literate director of estates and facilities, they then rolled out carbon literacy training as an essential piece of training to all of the senior managers and senior individuals in the estates and facilities team. And as a result, over 90 individuals became carbon literate certified within the space of about 3 months. So they hosted 3 large training sessions which got everybody on board. They were delivered online but could have been delivered in a face-to-face session, and quite quickly you can see the impact of how all of their estates and facilities team being carbon literate then actually led to very different decisions that got made against the organisation. And everyone has that background knowledge and that background information in order to, be able to drive a net zero agenda forward. So we've covered a lot today, and apologies if you still have questions. We do still have our Q&A and we will be looking into that in the next 30 minutes. But if you can't stick around for the next Q&A session, then you can find out much more details on our website. If you go to Toolkits and the Healthcare tab, there you can see all of our different toolkit pathways, and you can also download some overview packs so you can get a bit more of a feel and a bit more of a flavour for the materials that you could use to deliver training. Additionally, the events page is up on that blue arrow there, so that's where you can book onto your carbon literacy training sessions as an open session, and also your delivering successful CL sessions as well. And additionally, if you have any burning questions that just haven't been answered, then you can contact us using our contact form, or you can email us directly at healthcare@carbonliteracy.com. Fantastic. So I'll bring today to a little close. Do feel free to stick around because we are going to be hearing from Matt and Peter, and also be joined by my colleague Phil as well for a Q&A session. But just like to say thank you very much, and we're really excited to see where this goes. So yeah, if you've got any questions, let us know, and I will just end my slideshow, invite my fellow guest speakers up to the Q&A. Hi folks, hello, thank you for joining. Really nice to get all that live. Just give my teams a little hot minute to load up. We've still got some attendees on, which is great because it means that people do still have questions. There's nothing worse than coming to a Q&A and no one actually wants to hear from you, which is nice because Carbon Literacy often hosts events where people still hang on. Fab. So let me just see. So my team has marked some of the questions to be answered live. So the first question which I've got up here is, are the learning materials free to access for health and social care in Northern Ireland? We do not have NHS email addresses. So the e-learning that we've developed with e-learning for healthcare has been designed to be accessed by NHS email addresses up on the NHS Learning Hub. It has been designed with an England focus around targets and policies, which has kind of come in guidance with Greener NHS. Peter, you might be able to help. My knowledge of the ins and outs of the Learning Hub and who can and can't access is limited. Could you share any guidance on that?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're quite fortunate in that e-learning for healthcare are currently in the process of transferring all of their thousands of programs that they have at the moment on their platform onto a new one, and we're one of the first to go onto the new platform. What that means is when this program goes on there, it will be under what's called Blue Access, which is just a name for NHS healthcare and social care, but essentially, yes, all NHS emails will be able to access the training for free. This is the e-learning, and that does include Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, or certainly that's the lines that I have at the moment. I noticed there was a question later about third sector and charitable sector delivering NHS services. In the initial phase of rollout, when it's under Blue Access, which is the only type of access available when we first go onto the platform, further capability is being developed, it will just be those NHS emails plus some kind of arm's length bodies. So people working in NICE and some of the other arm's length bodies can access, and also those with Open Athens accounts. So those in education can access the training also. But the capability should be developed pretty soon, that will potentially allow us to widen that base of people who can access the training. That'll obviously require conversations with Carbon Literacy to make sure that that fits with everything that they need as well. But there's definitely a will to make all the training offers that we commission or develop across the Greener NHS programme as available to as many people as possible, and feasible within the partners that we work with, etc. So hopefully that answers some of the questions a bit further down the list as well, on access. But yes, certainly those working the NHS in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales will be able to access it. And as Louise has said, it has been developed by Greener NHS, which is obviously the England body looking at net zero, which means that the specific NHS policies within the training are the England targets. But having looked at the work from Scotland, certainly in Wales as well, I know there's lots of parallels, and I feel like learners will be able to draw the appropriate learning from that, and apply it to their own sector, and look at those home nation policies and just fill in those slight nuances and differences that exist there. Yeah, hopefully that answers that question, Louise.
Fabulous, thank you, Peter. I'm from the Carbon Literacy Project side for the follow-up workshop materials. So NHS, under the current licensing which we have, NHS organisations are enabled free access to the workshop materials to host the follow-up workshop training, which is a really key element in order to, well, you can't become carbon literate just by doing the e-learning, and the workshop materials contain all of the action-focused stuff. So we really wouldn't recommend just doing the e-learning, because quite often giving people all of the climate change knowledge, all of the climate change science can be just a little bit daunting and a little bit scary, and leave people feeling quite disempowered in terms of taking action. So we really wouldn't recommend just doing the e-learning. The key piece here in terms of driving action and creating significant change within the workplace is attending your workshop session. So those materials available to deliver the workshop session are available to NHS organisations for free. We do have a series of kind of discounts and different considerations available for non-profit organisations, but it is just worth getting in contact with us, because it's not free access outside of NHS organisations, and that's under the current funding package that we have, all of the work which we do here at the Carbon Literacy Project, we have to find funding for. So yeah, if you know, funding for private sector healthcare organisations would be available, then of course we'd be open to discussing that. But at the minute, there is charges involved. Now those charges are pulled on a sliding scale system, so it is fair for organisations to access. We don't favour, just because you're a huge organisation with a huge turnover and lots of money to throw at this, you know, we do try and make it as accessible as possible. But yeah, if you do have, it's on a case-by-case basis, so if you do have questions about that, then do get in touch. Just another quick practical one. So somebody on the Q&A asked about what do we do if people turn up for the workshop sessions and they haven't completed their e-learning. So getting your carbon literacy knowledge before you attend your carbon literacy workshop is really key and really core in understanding what you need to do in order to drive change. So we really would not recommend that anyone stays on the workshop to complete it without having done their e-learning. So it is up to the trainers to check that individuals have done their e-learning. Obviously on a trainer level, hopefully people will be honest about having completed that, but from the carbon literacy side level, we will be doing random spot checks. So if when trainers submit their action pledges, we will periodically be checking and making sure from the NHS, pulling data from the NHS Learning Hub, to make sure that individuals have completed their e-learning before they've gone on their workshop, because they won't be able to gain accreditation if they've just done one half of it. So even though we won't be checking every single person, we will be doing spot checks on there. So hopefully people will follow that through. Let me just have a quick look at questions, folks. So I did see a question for Matt somewhere here, which I can't seem to find now. It's always the way, isn't it?
I think I might know the one you mean.
If you've seen it, then please take over.
So I think the question was, what about organisations who are not considering encouraging staff to do carbon literacy? And I think that for me, actually, as I said before, carbon literacy isn't the title that necessarily encompasses all that the training provides. So I think that actually carbon literacy encompasses better outcomes for patients, better staff well-being, better finances for the organisation. So actually, I think that when I talk to PCNs or ICSs and they say, well, what is carbon literacy training? I say, well, actually, it's there to try and improve all of the things that you think are important. So, you know, the finances and the staff and the patients. It just so happens that all of those actions that we can put in place, or that you can put in place and that the staff can, are also the low carbon alternatives. It's the substitutions from a high carbon activity to a lower carbon activity. So actually, I think that I tend to sort of ask the organisation, well, what are the 3 things that you're most worried about? And actually, almost, not quite, but almost regardless of what they say, the answer is carbon literacy training. I'm worried about the car park. The hospital is over, but the car park causes us more complaints than anything else. Okay, well, let's think about, you know, what actions might help to solve that. And we go down the lift sharing, the low carbon active travel, the public transport. What sort of actions might enable some of these things to happen? So the organisation comes away and says, we've solved our biggest problem. I know we've done it in a low carbon way, so that we're contributing to a lower carbon, more habitable, you know, natural living world around us. So I would say to the organisation, what are the things that you're most worried about, and then phrase the answers through a carbon literacy lens, because actually they then go, yeah, I can see why this is relevant to us. I can see why it's important. I can see why all of our staff need to be signed up and engaged to this, and how their actions are actually going to be important, so that other people can see them, that they can join in, that they can share the solutions that they find. And there've been some amazing things that the organisations didn't realise. So one, for example, put in a green space, and actually staff then used it and sat and had a cup of tea together and had their lunch together, and their staff morale went up. That's not why they put in the green space. but it was the outcome on the patient, on the staff well-being, that was worth far more than the actual action of putting that thing in place. So I would ask them, what are your pain points? What are the things you're most worried about? Because carbon literacy, I think, is the answer to it.
I think it also just draws attention to the fact that climate change and health, there's just no denying that this is linked. Therefore, if something's going to be having a direct impact on our healthcare, then it's going to be directly impacting the national service which we have to provide that healthcare. And it's just this really core component of this isn't just about the individuals working on the sustainability teams or the estates teams. It's really affecting everybody across the board. And one thing which, the toolkit materials really remind people of, but I think is so often kind of overlooked slightly, I think, is that people who work for the NHS and the healthcare staff really are trusted messengers in society. And, who do you go to when you need advice about your health, about what's best for the health of you as an individual, of your children, of your communities? You go to your doctor, you go to your nurse, you go to your local healthcare provider, and they're the individuals who you trust in order to make the decisions which are best for you, and more widely best for the planet as well. So yeah, I think those links are just super important. So yeah, thank you so much, Matt. That's really useful. Fab. So next question, and I had this one was directed to, oh, it's gone somewhere else. Okay, I'll quickly answer this question while I look for the ones that keep disappearing. So Rebecca asked, will Greener NHS or NHS England run their own workshop sessions which individuals can attend, or do you have to organise your own? Currently only myself in a team due to a merger, so it would be helpful to join a group session. So the kind of cascade approach which carbon literacy goes down is that it's available for all to deliver, and individuals can host training sessions, but we know that sometimes individuals come to us and they are just interested in becoming carbon literate themselves. So Greener NHS and NHS England have pre-funded some spaces in order to attend externally hosted workshop sessions, and you can find that up on the events page of our website. So it is done on a completely open system, so anyone with an NHS email address can access those pre-funded spaces currently. They are limited, so at the moment it's on a first come first serve based system, but by joining onto them you don't have to pay for the session itself. That's been pre-funded and it's hosted by an external provider which is partnered with us, which provides healthcare training. Additionally, if you had that session, you became carbon literate, but you still didn't have the capacity to host carbon literacy internally, then you could go to an external provider, which we have organisations which we can recommend who can host carbon literacy training sessions, who we know provide great ones. Matt hosting one of those sessions of Sea Sustainability, specifically for primary care as well. So if that is the case and you're like, oh, we just don't have the resource, but perhaps we have some budget to throw at this, then you can bring external trainers in. Now that is a slightly more expensive option as well, because obviously you have to pay for those external trainers and their time to deliver the session, but we do understand that sometimes you do need that. I've got a few hands up in the attendees list, so we're not going to come round to you to chat, but please put your questions in the Q&A. I'm going to throw a question over to Phil as Director of Advocacy now, if that's okay. Probably things that we'll chip in on together, but there's a question in the chat to ask, is there any quantifiable outcome evidence from us, the Carbon Literacy Project, within the NHS, and how much is it impacting the agenda and at what cost? Now, obviously, my side, from an NHS side, this isn't something which we are able to provide yet, because carbon literacy within the NHS is quite a new thing, and this is our newest development. But we do have plans in place to evaluate the effectiveness of the training. So with our pilot learners, we'll be dropping back in 6 months' time, and also, we'll be looking to evaluate the effectiveness of the e-learning, and actually, from the individuals who have attended training, have they managed to complete the action pledges which they set to reduce emissions? And that is something which we will be putting together information for. But Phil, on a wider carbon literacy scale basis, what can you tell us about the kind of quantifiable outcome from carbon literacy training that you've seen?
You mentioned previously the estimate from Jacobs Engineering. This is from their low carbon behaviour specialist, who compared what we do with some of the projects that they've been involved in. I think they were involved in the BARTS project around energy saving, for example. And they came up with this ranging shot of 5 to 15%, which they felt they're very happy to put out into the public arena, just because motivated staff do more. So I think the idea that there is a quantifiable impact from carbon literacy, from effective staff engagement, is perfectly fair to put out there. What we have more of is data and research on the impacts on learners. If you go to carbonliteracy.com, and the About Us tag has a drop-down menu to research, some good but in the main relatively modest research papers reflecting on the very, very positive reactions from learners. And as you can imagine, particularly when we go into larger organisations, HR and L&D are very, very keen to evaluate this thing, carbon literacy, and it comes back with frankly, fantastic feedback about the positive reaction from learners. As to why, I think, given that we're at a time when the climate crisis is worrying people in the main, people are actually really hungry for the answer to what they can do about it. So to have work come in and go, right, and we're going to train you up and let you do some stuff, I think that's part of why it lands so well, quite apart from the distinctive elements of our methodology. And just to reflect briefly on the question about what if your organisation isn't doing this, we're absolutely here to strengthen your arm as a would-be advocate for carbon literacy. And it really does speak for itself. The examples we have thus far that have led to the evolution of this initiative within the NHS, and the multiple examples outside of the health sector can be brought to bear to make a very, very strong argument. And to sort of summarise what Matt was saying, it's a bit of a catch-22. People get carbon literacy when they're carbon literate, so the best thing to do is to just get on with it. If we can just start it, then it tends to speak for itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for adding that context there, Phil. So I think we've answered quite a few of the questions kind of all in one sort of answer. So hopefully everyone's got most of the answers that they've been looking for. But we do still have a little bit of time, so do feel free to pop any additional ones in the Q&A. But the next one, which I'm going to direct over to Peter, is how will this training compare with / relate to the 2 modules which are already recommended by the National Greener NHS team? And those modules are Building a Net Zero NHS and then Environmental Sustainability and Quality Improvement. And they're provided by Health Education England and our e-learning software formats as well. Yeah, how would you say that these 3 options compare? And obviously I can add details about what carbon literacy can provide, but in terms of setting the scene for the other training that's available within the NHS and where carbon literacy fits.
No, it's an excellent question. So as I mentioned, I think earlier on, that there is a plethora of training at the intersection of climate change and healthcare, which is emerging. This is one part of that, and a particularly exciting part, if I might add. But what we envisaged, so I guess we do a baseline survey, which you probably would have seen the results of every year, which told us that roughly 9 out of 10 staff were supportive of the NHS taking action on this. When we delve a little bit more into the details around that data, we realise that there is a gap on understanding capability and also a feeling of empowerment to go and take action. So there's a high level of support that doesn't always translate to action. And when we looked at the education space a couple of years back, we realised that there wasn't well, there wasn't even a generic offer for NHS staff at the intersection of climate change and health. So there wasn't an introductory module, there wasn't something that's a bit more advanced, there wasn't anything for leaders available in this country. Let alone the sort of wider questions of specialist training that people want, you know, training specific for nurses or for paediatricians or for state staff or procurement staff. So there was a huge gap, and we needed to decide where to fill it, or where to start by filling it. So the approach that we took nationally was to look at having something introductory, so an introductory level, which is a good gateway for anyone in the NHS to get a bit of an idea of the basics of the links between climate change and health, the impacts of climate change on our services, what the NHS is doing about it, and how you can get involved. And that's what the Building a Net Zero NHS module is. We think that's appropriate and suitable for all staff. So anyone can get involved. It's not compulsory to do that module before you take on this e-learning, but it's a great foundation just to get you introduced to some of the topics, the key policies, and a good place to start. Equally, with the so that, I guess, is our core introductory module. The sustainable quality improvement module is not sort of necessarily a core module, but we certainly see it as highly valuable to gain skills and build knowledge, I think, in a lot of the things that Matt Sawyer's been talking about in terms of finding that co-benefit between environment and also you know, financial savings, benefits to patients, improved safety, improved staff wellbeing, etc. That quality improvement, which is obviously a fundamental part of the way that we run healthcare, is a great way of learning more about that from a sustainability perspective. And where we saw this e-learning was more at that intermediate level of learning. So having perhaps done something like that module or done the Building a Net Zero NHS module, people will be inspired to go and learn more, and to learn more about how they can take action in their setting. And we really think that this carbon literacy training hits that sweet spot, because it's all about those skills, taking action. It gives you a bit more of a detail and grounding around the science underpinning all the action that we're taking, and the surrounding policy as well. So that sort of takes you to that more intermediate level. And then we have also developed and just launched a leadership offer as well, which is a little bit longer, but is worth sort of checking out if you're a leader and want to just look at leadership more from a leadership rather than a carbon perspective, but with a sustainability lens. So a different set of skills. Having said that, those are our three kind of core options that we developed, looking at something generic, which we think is appropriate for all different specialties. If you want to look at some of the other stuff that's available for different bespoke segments of the workforce, whether that be a specific clinical group or whether that be learning about procurement or yeah, there's so many examples. Please do have a look on Future NHS. If you have an NHS email address, go and join the Greener NHS Knowledge Hub on Future NHS, and then find the Learning Hub on there. Sorry, the Training Hub. And there's a whole list of different training programs that you can go on. Some free ones, some not free, some open learning, MOOCs, all sorts of stuff that's been collated and is updated regularly. So there's not just those core three options that we've mentioned there. There's a whole host of other things. But I think that this carbon literacy offer is a particularly strong part of that. And we look forward to seeing it sort of spread at pace.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I guess the carbon literacy offer is very customizable. So Matt spoke about blue slides and customizable content throughout, and that's something that Peter just touched on there as well. But there's a whole section within the workshop element of this carbon literacy accreditation which focuses on case studies. So it looks at how, you know, an organisation, what's happening across different organisations, across different workforce groups, and how that can be embedded and how that can be used to inspire. So what that does is it really sets the scene, and carbon literacy brings everyone up to the same level of understanding, because I think what you've got in delivering net zero is you've got lots of different people with lots of different knowledge bases, and we all have different understanding of how much we know about climate change and what drives it and the important parts of it. But actually carbon literacy just brings everyone up to that base level understanding. It's slightly more interactive, it's slightly more engaging than just an e-learning package. So it really gets people talking to each other and inspiring each other, and also addressing barriers as well, and you know, coming up with ideas which are suitable for across workforce groups as well. Okay, we're coming to our last kind of 5 minutes or so, and I've just got one sort of more question which I would like to cover in the Q&A, and this is kind of just about the practicalities of pledges and hosting workshop sessions and things like that, and the action pledge forms which individuals need to complete at the end of their workshop session is a really core important part of what we need here at the project in order to be able to certify learners, and there is time embedded within the workshop. So within the trainer manual which you'll receive when you request materials, you've got a full complete running order of all the activities and the slides and what you need to cover in each piece, and at the end of there you've got time embedded within the workshop to complete your action and evidence pledge forms. And so within the session, the idea is that individuals within the session complete those forms. Now, sometimes we get feedback that people want to go away and have conversations with other people, and that is absolutely fine. As a trainer, it's worth just being aware that once those people leave that room and leave that space, it becomes quite administratively intensive. And I'm sure Matt will probably give me a nod here in terms of chasing learners to get their evidence pledge forms. But unfortunately, we can't certify learners without them. So it is a really core element. Now, there's time embedded within that session, and we've also promoted the use of our online forms a bit more in this toolkit development. So traditionally people would complete these in a Word document, then they'd chuck them in an email and send them through to the trainers. Now kind of reviewing all of those and sending them all through to us here at the project is a little bit time intensive. So what we've done is put more of a focus on using our Microsoft Forms template in order to be able to complete evidence forms. So yeah, we'd really recommend doing that, because what that means is that trainers can completely gain all of their learner evidence and certification in one Excel document, and then they can ping it through to us. So it just kind of takes in that middle piece. And I guess also just really quickly to round up, because we are kind of running over now, that carbon literacy training is really about quality of training. So like I mentioned earlier with the estates and facilities case study that I mentioned, it's really about who you get in the room and getting the right people in the room who are really on board with the agenda, and they can really drive training much further. Fab. So I'm actually going to draw today to a close now, because we've just reached over 1:30. So thank you everyone who has joined us and come along. Yes, I speak on behalf of everyone, and all these claps coming from the guest speakers. That we're really excited about, you know, this latest lead of work, and we're really looking forward to seeing the potential of this spreading across the NHS. And yeah, it's been a lot of hard work by a lot of really fantastic individuals. So thank you everyone so much for your contribution to today's session, and also to this launch and this work that we've been doing. But yeah, thank you very much indeed. I hope everyone goes away and enjoys their Monday. It is World Environment Day today as well, so good opportunity to host a session like this, and the significance of it. Yeah, have a fantastic day.